As the COVID-19 pandemic rages on in most parts of the world, how are Agilists finding meaning and purpose in these troubled times? How can we connect, inspire, and support each other? In days gone by, Caravanserai has provided rest, recovery, and community for travelers along the ancient Silk Road. Similarly, we hope that our Agile Caravanserai episodes will provide rest, inspiration, and hope. We hope each episode will remind us of our shared Agile values and thus bring us closer together. In past episodes, we've heard from Agile Manifesto authors like Jim Highsmith, Kent Beck, and Alistair Coburn. We've connected with captains of industry like Michael Cara from Nationwide Insurance. We've also heard from global Agile titans including Rashina Hoda and Evan Laybourne from Australia and Naresh Jain from India. As we begin to see the glimmers of hope for the end of the pandemic, Agilists continue to respond with resilience. This is a time for transformation. I invite you to join me as we continue our journey together. I'm Sanjeev Augustine, and this is Agile Caravanserai. Johanna Rothman, also known as the Pragmatic Manager, is a coach, consultant, speaker, and advisor. Johanna offers frank advice for tough problems with managing projects, programs, and project portfolios. Essentially, Johanna helps leaders and teams do reasonable things that work. She started her career in software engineering and started managing cross-functional projects in 1979 and then managing programs in 1988. Johanna founded the Rothman Consulting Group in 1994, and she's had a virtual team long before 2020 when the pandemic disrupted the entire world. Additionally, Johanna is the author of 18 books, fiction and nonfiction, hundreds of articles, and she also works on a monthly newsletter and blogs regularly at jrothman.com and createadaptablelife.com. In the community, Johanna has served as a program chair for the Agile Alliance for 6 years, as well as a technical editor for TechWell and a contributing writer to Test Rail by Gurock. Johanna was recently guest speaker at our very own DC Lean Plus Agile meetup, where she covered modern management and gave us some really awesome nuggets of wisdom. You can follow Johanna on Twitter at Johanna Rothman. For now, let's hear it from Johanna Rothman. So without further ado, I'd like to get you speaking to our listeners out there. And as you know, we have these 3 questions that we'll go through. So let's jump into the first one. We've passed the manifesto, the milestone of the manifesto signing 20 years. So it's been a long time. And you've been involved with the Agile movement for a long time as well. So just interested in your reflections of the last 10, 20 years of Agile from your perspective, and you have a unique vantage point for sure.
So I think that I certainly thought, I cannot claim to have mind melted with anybody else. I thought that once we, quote, fixed our projects to have more interim deliverables, more experimentation, more collaboration, that we would be, quote, done, right? And you and I have been in the leadership arena for a while, because I thought that it was mostly a project problem, and that once we kind of fixed the project problems, we would be able to show how great we were, and all the organizational leadership problems would get fixed kind of by themselves. I was so wrong. I was so wrong, right? So, and I think you and I have had conversations about that in the interim. And I believe about a decade ago, I actually said to you, it's not just a project problem. And you said to me, yeah, we know. So I think that perspective of mine, while it was a useful perspective to say, let's focus on what we can easily control, how we approach our projects, how we staff them, how we use interim deliverables, how we use experiments, all that stuff. That was useful. It was nowhere near sufficient.
Yeah. And, I do want to drill down a little bit on that, because you brought up something very insightful. There were folks like yourself and me and others who are looking at the whole project implementation of Agile and saying, this is necessary, but it's not sufficient. But what do you think was the biggest obstacle to getting people to realize that in those days? It's certainly widespread now. You hear a lot about lean portfolio management. It's I wouldn't say commonplace, but it's at least more widespread now. But what do you think we were dealing with then that we were not able to get our message through?
So at that time, I had started to use stage delivery, which is an incremental life cycle with interim deliverables. Right? We specifically had monthly. I normally use monthly releases, not quite like a release train, but a monthly release. And because I used an incremental approach, I had really good results with a project portfolio. And then I published my first project portfolio book in 2009. And I was quite surprised that people said, how is this even possible? I mean, how could they not think that this was possible, right? How could you not commit to a team? How could you not fund a team or a product? How could you not do any of that? And that's when I realized that we had some cognitive dissonance between what management and this comes from senior leadership all the way through. Senior leadership wanted more predictable metrics, approaches, and we were dealing with even less predictability, right? Less in the products, less in the marketplace, less with the people, less everywhere. So we have this smushing of the need, the perceived need for predictability, and the actual environment that we now admit that we live in.
Yeah, it's I love that use of the term cognitive dissonance. Also, sort of reminds me of Jerry Weinberg's. He referred to it as incongruence. We wanted to do something, but we were not congruent with that. So thanks for sharing that perspective. Second question. I'm seeing you after a long time, and I was just telling you that to me it appears that you're glowing. So you seem to be doing very well during the pandemic. So how are you doing personally during the pandemic?
So personally, I got to say, not being on a plane has really been helpful for my health. I am walking more. I'm drinking more water. I've managed to lose about 5 pounds. Yeah, that in the incessant need to lose my weight. At some point I will do it. But I'm healthier now than I was before, because I'm not, I was, even before the pandemic, I was traveling a couple of times a month. Oh. Yeah. And I find that I have the vertigo thing going on, right? There's all kinds of weird stuff with me. But I find that I am able to do my work even better now, that people that whether it's project-based agility or portfolio or even leadership, that people need time between the segments of work that we do together. And now that I've had to be remote, there's a lot of really good reasons to stay that way.
Yeah. To introduce some slack in the schedule and some time to relax, and maybe since you're doing well on that water, turn some of that water into wine and relax a little bit.
Yeah, well, in the evening with dinner. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, a third question. You have a number of fans all over the world. I remember reading your books, and the portfolio one was very seminal when it got released. What words of hope and inspiration would you provide to many fans out there? We're still dealing with the pandemic. There's still a colossal loss, and we're not anywhere back to the world as it used to be, 2 years ago, and we'll likely never be back to that. So, what hope and inspiration as our sort of difficult journey continues?
So, I'm actually one of those annoying optimists. I actually think that we will come back in quotes to something better. That we have an opportunity to remake our lives, to remake our workplaces, to remake our cultures, privately in our families, in our organizations. I'm not going to get into politics because that's that's way too hard. But we have an opportunity to increase our adaptability and resilience in every single thing that we do. And it's all about the principles of agility, right? What experiment do you want to use now? How will you take a small step and measure the results? How will you reflect on it later and choose what to do next and what not to do next? So I actually think that when we use the principles of agility, we can create a better, let's just talk about the organization and our lives, right? We can create much better workplaces, much better lives, and really see how we can create that connection between the people, right? Even though we are far apart, we still need connection, and we can use our adaptability and resilience to work on that too.
Awesome. That's a very hopeful and inspirational message. Thank you so much, Johanna. Appreciate your time. Any last parting message for folks out there?
Well, first of all, thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation. And secondly, I keep writing books, so check out my books.
What's the latest one?
So the latest 3 are the Modern Management Made Easy books, and they're in the form of myths and then options to reconsider what you're doing now. So,
and they're all on Amazon.
They're everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Johanna. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.